Gentlemen, the king comes.
I will not delay you long, but will say only this to you. As God is my witness, I have forgiven those that have brought me here, and pray that my death be not laid to their charge. For I do endeavor, even to the last, to maintain the peace of my kingdom.
And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll make it clear, I'll state my case, of which I am certain.
I go now from a corruptible to an incorruptible crown, to everlasting peace.
I've lived a life that's full, traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets.
Lord, let us now thy servant depart in peace according to thy word. For mine eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all people. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost, as was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be.
Yes, there were times, I guess you knew, when I bit off much more than I could chew. But with it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up, then spit it out. I grew tall in spite of it all, and did it my way.
In my first sequence on the Joliffe family, I introduced you to this book written by one of our relatives documenting the Joliffes in America. And as you recall, this particular author, after his research, determined that Thomas Joliffe was a royalist and attended Charles I at his execution, after which Thomas, who was the owner of Caswell Castle in Cofton-on-Hacket, was dispossessed of his holdings. And this particular Joliffe author states that Thomas took his young son John, which is our relative, my relative comes through, John, the American heir, over to the Indies. And then once Charles II was restored to the throne, then Thomas was restored to his land holdings. And here we have Prince Charles by Van Dyck, King Charles by Van Dyck. I just love these paintings. It shows him in all his glory. Here's a particularly interesting one in which he claimed the divine right of kings, and that was his quarrel with the Parliament and Cromwell, is that they wanted a representative government and he wanted total rule. And he did so for about 14 years, and after which it's reported by historians that he did a lot for Britain. He rebuilt infrastructure, he built bridges, he built roads, he provided a skeleton program for welfare for the poor. He was doing a lot, but he was squeezed by the banks and the landholders. And so he had to restore the Parliament in order to receive financing. And as I showed you in the previous first part of the video on the Joliffes, is that one of our relatives was part of the Minister of Parliament, and he provided loans to England at that time to restore some of the wealth of the country, and he was a Turkey trader at the Levant Company. And so as I went through the history of all these struggles and wars between Protestants, and then we, seesawed back to Catholic claims on the throne, back to Protestant claims on the throne, everything just seems to get all mixed up and in chaos. And they do have that saying that the elite bankers even put on so many of their symbolism, which is order out of chaos. And that's called the Hegelian dialectic. You fund both sides of a dispute, and whoever wins shakes out. That's the order. And that's the order of the universe, because the universe and nature knows its direction and its location and its velocity. And so what these metaphysical magicians will do is that they will fund both sides of any conflict, and whatever is the last person or the last man standing, that is the divine order of the universe. Joliffe book, it indicates that a painting of Thomas Joliffe attending Charles I's execution is contained in Caverswell Castle, and I believe this must be the painting by Van Dyck, because it's in with photos of Caverswell Castle. And so one of these attendants is supposed to be representative of Thomas Joliffe, our great-great-grandfather. I also found this book on the internet, and this is dealing with the sacred religious works, and if you can read that, of Caroline, the religious sacred Caroline, or the works of that great monarch and glorious martyr, King Charles I, which is very interesting. So Charles I was a Stuart, but here it also indicates that he may have been descended from the Carolingian line after the Merovingian line of the Franks. And so, as I'm saying, there's so much chaos between bloodlines and between lines of the monarchs. It's very difficult to really determine with precision the descent or the order of bloodlines and ruling aristocracies and the kings. That's why we had the Yorks and the Lancasters fight for so many years to the bloody deaths of each other. And then Henry VIII dynasty came out of that bloodlines of fighting by two different houses of the British monarchs. But I find this interesting also because our family, who was a loyalist to King Charles I, settled in Virginia first, which represents the Virgin Queen, or Elizabeth I, and then Peter, my direct relative descendant, established or bought property in North Carolina, Carolingian, and South Carolina was Joseph, Carolingian. So obviously, or I can deduce or extrapolate from this, that we, the Joliffes, believe we descend from Charlemagne and the Carolingian dynasty of France. I knew about the Jolies before I started this investigation into a deeper history of our family name is that Jolie comes from the word jolie in French. Jolie means happy, merry, etc. But it also is a derivation of a French word called boat. Jolles is a boat in French, or we came from a family of merchant shippers. And we have seen that in our family history going back to the Levant Company. We were called Turkey traders, etc. But the other part of the history that I was familiar with was our French Huguenot history, which meant that the Joliffes were a long-time Protestant French family. And as you know, during the Inquisition, the French Huguenots were persecuted and executed by the popes and the kings in France. And there was a long history of just massive genocide of French Huguenots, to the point where the French Huguenots ended up being squeezed into Normandy and Brittany. And from Normandy and Brittany, the Huguenots escaped over to England. And it is believed that it was through the Norman conquest that the French established their place in the British Isles. But here is this beautiful monastery of Mont Saint-Michel on the coast of Normandy, and I visited this, and you can hike out. There's a bridge, a land bridge that goes over to this island or fortress that was turned into a Catholic monastery after its siege. And this is where the French Huguenots did one of their last battles with the Popish Catholics of France. And the other thing I've got here is this is a Wikipedia entry for Mont Saint-Michel. It says 1067 the monastery of Mont Saint-Michel gave its support to William the Conqueror in his claim for the throne of England. This he rewarded properties and grounds on the English side of the Channel, including small islands off the southwestern coast of Cornwall, which is modeled after the mount, and became a Norman priory named St. Michael's Mount of Penzance. As you call, I started out this video investigation of the Jolly family with two mysteries. One of them concerned Principal Chief John Jolly of the Cherokee West. And my brother had told me that John Jolly, spelled Jolly, was not related to us. But as I've shown through Kisiah Jolly and through the many generations of Jollies, that the Jolly was spelled either way. And it didn't really indicate what family you came from or who your line was. I posited or speculated that perhaps Jolly more than likely was given to the Native American line to help determine which is the Native American line of the Jollies. But again, that is only my working theory, and I do not have that much evidence to support that. And as far as John Jolly being related to the John Jolly line that came over from Virginia and settled into South Carolina and North Carolina, there is very little evidence except for a few strands. And those strands are what I'm going to be presenting today. And I think there is a good argument and evidence to suggest that John Jolly did in fact come from this one family line through John Jolly of Virginia, stretching back to Thomas Jolly of Leek. So I'm going to begin with going through our family line very quickly, starting with my father, Calvin Barnson Jolly, and going back to the common ancestor of John Thomas Jolly. We're going to do an unbroken genealogical line for my father, Bryant Calvin Barnson Jolly, through his father, Alfonso Jolly. So here's Bryant Alfonso Jolly. His father is Reuben Manning Jolly. Here's Reuben Manning Jolly. His father is Reuben Manning Sr. So here's Reuben Manning Sr. And Reuben Manning Sr.'s father is Henry Jolly. Here's Henry Jolly. And he's the son of John Jolly. He's also the one that joined the Mormon Church, born in Pitt County, but died in Pleasant Grove, Utah. So as the son of John Jolly, here's John Jolly Sr., born in Pitt County. John Jolly is the son of Jesse Jolly. So let's pull up Jesse Jolly. Jesse Jolly, also Pitt County, North Carolina, son of Peter. Peter here is born in Norfolk, Virginia, and he is the father of Jesse, but also the son of Peter Sr. So here's Peter Sr. Peter Sr., born in Norfolk, Virginia, about 1682. He is the son of Thomas Jolly, which is the Thomas Jolly that was married to Margaret Skinner. John Thomas Jolly, and he was born at Cofton Hackett, Worcestershire, son of Margaret Skinner and the husband to Mary Wrigglesworth. So I'm going to just go back to the wiki tree, which has more information on it about our family. But here we have Peter Jolly. Peter Jolly is a brother of Joseph, Elizabeth, Thomas, and Joseph Jolly, and married to the son of John Jolly and Mary Wigglesworth. Here's John Jolly again. John Jolly, aka Joliffe, Crofton Hackett, Worcestershire. He is the brother of Benjamin. Benjamin is the British heir, and John Joliffe was the American heir, and they were the sons, co-heirs of Thomas Joliffe and Margaret Skinner of Gofton Hall, Hackett, Worcestershire. In this passage, family record of Mary Joliffe and Robert Higgins, her husband, married March 7, 1797. Mary Joliffe was the second child of William and Elizabeth Joliffe, born a member of the Friends Society. She was given certain property on the death of her father. She continued to live with her mother and brother until her 34th year, when she was married by the Reverend Baumann in the Episcopal minister to Colonel Robert Higgins. Higgins was born in 1744, and when 12 years of age had a narrow escape from the capture by Indians. And it tells of his being out and about, and one night late, and if he had not heeded the sound of Indians lurking up on him, he would have been kidnapped. But subsequently, Higgins became active captain in the Revolutionary Army, after which he was given certain warrants and certain property. And part of that property came when he had been captured and remained a prisoner for more than a year, suffered horribly throughout his entire imprisonment. That was during the Revolutionary War. At the close of the war, he was given of Virginia a large military grant of land, and his marriage with Mary, he removed to his estate in Ohio. His wife died in the year of 1806 when 43 years of age. They left 4 children, one of whom married Brigadier General Thomas L. Hammer of the United States. And General Hammer served under Ulysses Grant in the Civil War, but it comes down here, it talks about the 3 children of Higgins and Mary Joliffe, how they had been kidnapped by the Indians, and I'll read this again very quickly. Thomas Higgins was one of the earliest settlers on the Corahotown. He lived about 4 miles from Bath, was driven hence and removed to his neighborhood of Gerardstown in the county of Berkeley. After his removal, and they're talking about the removal by, I believe, the French Indian War, 3 of his sons were taken off prisoner and never returned. At the close of the Dunsmore's War, one of them was seen at Wheeling and asked why he did not come home, since his father had left him a good tract of land. He replied that he did not wish to live with the white people. They would always call him Indian, and he had land enough. Kercheval, and that's John Higgins, took up 110 acres in the land of Prince William County in 1741. So in the entire book, this is the only mention of Native American blood being in our family. It was 3 of Elizabeth's children. But interesting enough, as you know, Chief John Jolly, always traveled with friends, and they were John Rogers and John Ross. You'll see all the way through this Jolly history. 3 families always together, tied together: the Jollies, the Rogers, and the Rosses. And what's interesting about this is even the Native American had Chief John Jolly, Chief John Rogers, and Chief John Ross. And if you want to think of something more ironic, remember the skull and crossbone on pirate ships? It's called the Jolly Roger. Again, loyalist to Queen of England, Elizabeth I, and royal to the Stuarts after. Interesting. I want to show you, this is in the Joliffe history again. In the Land Office of Richmond, Virginia, to Mr. William Joliffe, Jr., and to his wife, Lydia Ross. So William Joliffe's, and here's Alexander Ross, resided in Scotland, where his son John was born. And the Joliffes and the Rosses intermarry quite a bit. There's quite a few generations, I believe, here of Rosses. Let me see if I can find any more. So let's see. Lydia Ross, now wife to William Joliffe. See if I can find any more. John Ross, deceased, 210 acres, a grant to William Joliffe of Frederick Company, 152 acres, adjoining Alexander Ross's patent land. William Joliffe Sr. on the drains of the Opecon. And there's so many of these Rosses here. So Alexander Ross was a major colonialist, and it just seemed more than a coincidence that we have John Jolly, Chief John Jolly, and then Chief John Ross, both surnames that our families were related to from the very beginning in Virginia. And that with the also the mention that the three sons of Mary, Joliffe, and Higgins considered themselves Indian shows that there was intermarriage between Native Americans and the Jollies and the Rosses. I'm going to return you again to the page of Chief John Jolly, and there's some inconsistencies here that perk my suspicion on John Jolly. Number one, it says he was a wealthy merchant and planter, but spoke no English. I find it very difficult to believe that a wealthy merchant and planter would speak no English. And he dressed in buckskin with a hunting shirt and leggings and moccasins, according to the Cherokee website. And here we have Mr. John Jolly dressed up like an Indian, a Native American. But I'm going to show you how the Cherokee actually did dress during the period of time, and they dressed like Englishmen. They were called the civilized tribes, and they intermarried with the colonialists, and they owned most of the territory of North Carolina, Tennessee. And it was through the Trail of Tears in which Andrew Jackson, displaced all the Cherokee Nation, which was considered and referred to as the civilized tribes, to the Arkansas, Oklahoma area. So the fact that this Mr. John Jolly would dress like this, to me, appears to be somewhat of a costume. And I'm going to show you how John Ross, one of the most famous Cherokee chief, dressed. Here's a Wikipedia page on John Ross, Chief John Ross. John Ross, October 1790 to 1866, also known by an Indian name like Chief John Jolly, meaning Cherokee, was the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation from 1828 to 1866, serving longer in that position than any other person. He is described as the Moses of his people. Ross influenced the Indian Nation through such a tumultuous events as the relocation to the Indian Territory and the American Civil War. John Ross was the son of a Cherokee mother and a Scottish father. His mother and maternal grandmother were of mixed Scotch Cherokee, since his maternal grandfather was another Scottish immigrant. Anyway, Principal Chief John Ross is one of the most famous and adored heroes of the Cherokee Nation. He was an ambassador to Andrew Jackson, tried to negotiate maintaining the property, the legal property of the Cherokee in Tennessee, in South Carolina, and North Carolina, but it was to no avail. And basically, he felt very betrayed because the Cherokee had fought along with the Revolutionary soldiers in the Revolutionary War, and they had been promised that, like the white colonialists, they would be allowed to keep their land, but that was a promise broken, as all the promises were broken. But I just want you to take a look. This is a man, John Ross, and this is how they dressed. And you saw how John Jolly dressed. Oh, there we have it. It looks as though that this might be one of those young lads that I'm going to refer you to, which became very hostile toward the Jolly family, and basically said when they were spotted that they were always going to be Indians and that they were not going to return to white man's country. And you never know. There was a lot of intrigue going on during this period of time, and the British were trying to use the Indians against the colonialists against the Indians. And so he might have been a witting or unwitting player in the whole land grab between the colonialists, Andrew Jackson, carpetbaggers after the Civil War. We don't know, but that's speculation for me right now. But I'm just saying that his dress does not appear to be very authentic for the time, and especially since he was a wealthy merchant planter, he may look like he's playing a part more than anything right now.
I hate the song. Oh, I hate the song. Yeah, you sing it for 8 years, you would hate it too. Don't give me that jazz. Sure, I love it. I like to get one every week. The little Arab, he only writes one every 7 years for me. And now the end is near, And so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll make it clear, I'll state my case, of which I am certain. I've lived a life that's full, traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way.